Hello everyone and welcome to another Defcamp and Melderon TV guide. My name is Melderon and
Defcamp here.
we're going to be talking about TBC Classic, guys. Yes, indeed. We are thinking the TBC are going to be coming out in early 2021, so we can get everyone prepared for this amazing game. We're going to be going over all the classes and all the specs, their overviews, what their uses are in both PvE and PvP to allow you to be more informed about what class to pick in TBC Classic. As with all of my guides, guys, there will be timestamps in a pinned comment below, as well as annotations on the video itself if you want to click and go to the class you're most interested in. Without further ado, let's get started. So before we get into the actual classes, guys, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about class balance. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard that class balance is vastly improved in TBC Classic or TBC versus Vanilla or Vanilla Classic, and that is generally true. However, metas will still exist. The biggest core difference between Classic and TBC, in my opinion, is that each class in Vanilla had some role. Druids had Innervate, they had buffs, they had battle res, but not all Druid specs were viable. What you see in TBC, you start to see the emergence of specs that have certain roles. In Classic, we can say easily that every class had some role, but now we can say that most specs have a role, and that's an interesting difference between Classic Vanilla and Classic TBC. But however, I want to make sure you guys realize that metas will absolutely exist in TBC. It's not gonna just be gone. There's things that are definitely clear, and metas will exist in TBC.
Now, we're not entirely sure what iteration of TBC we're going to get yet, but most likely we're going to be having a 2.4.3 build, which means that the later iteration of the game where all the classes have changed is going to be what we're going to see for TBC. That being said, there are classes that are much better in this iteration of the game than they were earlier. Warlocks and casters on the higher DPS end, where melee is a little bit lower, but things are much more balanced than they were back in Classic.
Yeah, generally that's the general rule of thumb, guys. It says generally that range DPS classes perform and scale better compared to melee. However, melee does catch up, and that's something that you have to realize is that it's not all about the casters, and there are places for melee DPS. In PvP, Druids are absolutely amazing. So are Warriors, Warlocks, Rogues, Mages, Priests. There are certain comps, and remember we have Arena now. It's not just flat out Battlegrounds. So we have Arena. And the combinations of these classes and how they interact with each other is really what makes the PvP meta. So something to keep in mind. But on the right here is a pie chart. And what this pie chart shows is all the different aspects of the game. Economy, leveling, PvP, and PvE. But what I'm trying to display here is that this pie chart is going to look different for each player. How much do you want to put into PvE? How much do you want to put into PvP? How much do you want to put into farming? Is leveling important to you? These are the questions you have to ask yourself when picking your main character or alts you're going to be playing. So think about your pie chart before we move on to the classes themselves. So we're going to be going in alphabetical order, guys, and first we're going to be starting with the Druid. Now, if you played Druid in Classic, you'll know that they weren't the best at pretty much anything. They were great flag carriers in PvP, they were good off-tanks, they were pretty good healers. There are certain Druids that were doing very well in healing. Unfortunately, Boomkin and Feral DPS kind of fell off. Druids get improvements in TBC to make them more competitive in almost every role. In Restoration, you get Tree of Life, which increases the healing output you do, of course, but it also increases the heals that everyone in your party takes. Great spell. Tree of Life is going to be essential for any Resto Druid that's in a raid. Life Bloom and Swiftmend are great as well. Life Bloom is another hot in the Druid arsenal, and Swiftmend actually absorbs or takes use of the hots you have on the target to do an instant heal. And while we're on the topic of hots, actually hots got really fixed in TBC. You can have multiple applications of the same hot on a target now, unlike in Classic. So that's going to be a big boost to Druid heals. As far as Feral is concerned, Feral tanks, Mangle and Lacerate kind of work synergistically. Lacerate is a bleed that you put on the target, while Mangle is a damage that you put on the target that does a high amount of threat, of course, because of its additional damage, but also works synergistically with the bleeds that you from Lacerate. It also will buff bleeds that are other DPS that are in that group. Maim from Cat form is an Incapacitate that's mostly used for PvP, but that's really awesome as well. And then Boomies get a increase into their Moonkin aura. It used to be 3% in Vanilla, now it's 5% in TBC Classic, and because of that, they're going to be put into caster groups in many guilds to buff Warlock or Mage damage, something to keep in mind. And last but not least, which we'll talk about in the next slide, but they have Swift Flight form. And this is great because not only is it cheaper than the epic flying for other classes, that's an instant cast, and we'll get into why that's really important in the next slide. So in the next slide, we're going to be talking about the general overview. And as I said before, PvE, competent healers and off-tanks, definitely going to have both of those in your raid. And you're going to have at least one Restorative Druid, most likely a Feral Tank, and then you'll probably have a Moonkin as well, depending on your guild and your comp, to increase the spell crit of your caster groups. Now guys, Defcamp's going to go over why Druids are amazing in PvP.
So Druids are the absolute kings of Arena, guys. And when I say that, I mean it. Druids can pretty much match up with any other class and reign supreme inside the arena. And the reasons why are pretty evident. Druids get Life Bloom, which is an amazing hot because not only can you put it on your target, but you can also put it on yourself. It has up to 3 stacks. So you could essentially put 2 stacks on your target, put 1 on yourself, and when the duration is over, you get a nice Life Bloom proc, which gives a good amount of healing, increasing more with the stacks. Now, a big reason why Druids were so good in flag carrying in vanilla was because of their shape-shifting and their get out of every stun and pretty much any incapacitate you can think of. Now, you still have that in Arena, but you also have an amazing CC included with that. That CC is Cyclone. Cyclone tosses the enemy target into air, preventing all action, but making them invulnerable for up to 6 seconds. Now, what's great about this is you can Cyclone a target that is down to 20% health, and the other healer on the team can't heal them. So it's a great way to keep someone at low health, or it's a great way to just CC a healer or anyone else just to keep them out of the game. One of the biggest things for Druids is their, like I said, their shape-shifting capabilities. Now, going into bear form, going into cat form and getting away swiftly, being able to shapeshift into different forms is what separates Druids from any other class. So there are multiple specs that are viable for Druids in Arena, some of them being into Moonkin, some of them being down in the Tree of Life form. You can match them up with pretty much any class. In 2v2, Druid and Warrior or Druid and Warlock really reign supreme, and in 3v3 you can match up a Druid with a Warlock, a Warrior, and just multitudes of other classes. To be able to play a Druid does take a bit of practice, so I do want to say that it may take a good player a little while to get used to it. However, they are pretty smooth and a very good class. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of Druids in TBC.
Yeah, and finally guys, we're talking about that flight form again. Because it's an instant cast, and because it's a Druid form, you can actually herb while flying. And this is going to make them best for herb farming in TBC Classic. Alright guys, let's now move on to the Hunters. Another very strong class in TBC Classic, both PvE and PvP. Now, all 3 specs are viable in some part of the game. Beast Mastery Hunters are actually very, very good and will top DPS charts in TBC Classic in multiple phases of the game, as well as being a very powerful and offensive PvP spec. This is primarily because of how your Beast will do damage and how synergy works with the Beast Within and Kill Command. Now, the Beast Within actually is linked to Bestial Wrath, where if you use Bestial Wrath, you get an increase to the pet's damage, but also your damage. And every time you crit as the Hunter, you can use Kill Command and cause this burst damage from your pet. It's actually pretty amazing. So this is actually going to synergize both in PvE and PvP. And with the addition of Steady Shot as well, which does a lot of damage. In addition to that, Aim Shot for PvP acts like a Mortal Strike in TBC Classic, reducing all healing done to that target by 50%. Also, they have Silencing Shot, which is excellent in PvP, which silences the target, Snake Trap, which can be very annoying, and then Aspect of the Viper. Now, Aspect of the Viper is also a great ability, especially if you're running it low on mana in a PvE or PvP encounter, where you can actually turn this aspect on and regenerate mana equal to 55% of your intellect. Now, what's interesting is the less mana you have, the more impactful this aspect is. So in some DPS rotations, especially if it's a long fight, you can use the Aspect of the Viper to regain mana in a PvE scenario. And finally, we can talk about Misdirection. Hunters were the pullers in Classic WoW, but it was hard because you would pull and die, or you would pull and your Feigned Death would not work. Well, now with Misdirection, the threat caused by your next 3 attacks will be literally transferred to the person you put Misdirection on. So if you put it on the main tank, you do a aim shot, multi-shot, whatever combo, now all that threat is now given to the tank, and you can run away safely. So Misdirection is going to make Hunter pulling much, much easier. Before we go into the general overview, I'd like to talk about raid buffs. Now, what's really interesting about Hunters is that they bring a lot to the raid now, where they didn't really before. Now, of course, they had True Sight Aura in Classic WoW, but now they bring even more buffs to the raid. And because of this, you're going to bring 2 different Hunter specs into your raid. Most of your Hunters will be Beast Mastery, but you're also going to have a Survival Hunter because of Exposed Weakness. Because the ranged critical strikes have a 100% chance to apply an Exposed Weakness effect to the target. Now, Exposed Weakness increases the attack power of all attackers against the target by 25% of your own agility. That includes all the melee, and the other hunters in the raid. So as the survival hunter, you're going to be sacrificing some of your damage to boost the damage of other Beast Mastery hunters in the raid and other melee. And as far as Beast Mastery is concerned, when your pet scores a critical strike, all party members have all damage increased by 3% for 10 seconds, and this effect stacks with the amount of hunters in your raid. This is huge. You're going to have all your Beast Mastery hunters in a group together, and they're going to be working synergistically to increase their own DPS. Very, very different from how it was in Classic. Hunters go from one of the worst DPS classes to one of the best in one expansion because of these things. Now let's talk about the general overview. PvE, hunters are a top tier DPS class in almost every part of the game, Beast Mastery being the top, and then excellent DPS support in survival hunters. So they're going to be very sought after classes in TBC Classic.
Now for PvP, hunters are an amazing class as well. If druids are S tier, you could say the hunters are probably B tier, maybe even A tier in the right hands. The thing that's really awesome about hunters is that pretty much every spec is viable in the arena, with Beast Mastery hunters putting out some of the most burst potential, but being a little bit more on the vulnerable side with their pet. So if their pet dies, they have to either res their pet or try to survive without it. One thing that is really awesome about the hunter in the arena is that they are able to put out some more CC, with traps, possibly even silencing shot. Hunters can put out an amazing amount of damage, and as Melderon stated before, aim shot now works as a Mortal Strike type effect, decreasing all healing by 50%. This, of course, is very good inside the arena, and you can see hunters being paired up with Resto Druids in 2v2, possibly another DPS, and in 3v3, they're going to be paired up with most likely a healer and another DPS, such as a Druid or a Warlock.
Yeah, as well, Marksman Hunters can also be very, very good comp with this Priest as a more balanced comp. But as far as perks are concerned, guys, these are heavily sought after class in TBC Classic, and they're excellent for farming and leveling, just like they were in Vanilla Classic. Now we're going to move on to the Masters of the Arcane Arts, the Mages. Mages get a huge overhaul in TBC Classic with the addition of many, many spells and abilities. I had to put them on 2 slides. We'll go over the fire stuff first. Molten Armor, which is great for many reasons, because it actually decreases the chance to be critically struck by 5%, which could have its uses in PvP. In PvE, it increases your crit by 3%, so this is huge, and this will be the armor that you're going to use as a mage to DPS. Playing with fire increases all spell damage caused by 3% and all spell damage taken by 3%. So of course this is kind of like a risky thing to use in PvP, but in PvE in most scenarios this would be a great increase to your DPS. Pyromaniac increases chance to critically hit and reduces the mana cost of all fire spells, again building that crit synergy. And then Molten Fury increases damage of all spells against targets with less than 20% health by 20%. So it's kind of like mages have an execute phase in TBC Classic, which is really interesting as well. But Arcane is also a viable DPS spec for mages because of talents like Spell Power, which increases the critical strike damage bonus by all spells by 50%, which is huge. Mind Master increases spell damage by up to 25% of your intellect. Arcane Potency increases the critical strike chance of all your spells while clear casting. And then Arcane Blast, with the new 41-point talent for Arcane mages in TBC Classic. And this has a very unique effect in that it does more damage and costs more mana the more you use it and the more you apply it. But we have even more, ladies and gentlemen. In the next slide, we have all of the unique kind of utility / PvP things that mages will get in TBC Classic. Spell Steal, which steals a beneficial buff from a target and gives it to you. Invisibility, you actually can go stealth as a mage for 20 seconds, allowing you to bypass certain scenarios or get to places that are hard to get, or in PvP, you can use it to move around the map easily. Ritual of Refreshment, no longer do mages have to keep clicking over and over again to make food and water. Now they can make, just like Warlocks, they can make a Ritual of Refreshment to create a refreshment table where people can click on themselves and get food and water. Makes their lives a lot easier. Dragon's Breath is the 41-point talent in Fire, which is more of a PvP oriented, but it's a frontal cone ability that disorients targets for 3 seconds. Slow, which is in the Arcane tree that reduces movement speed by 50% and the time between attacks and casting by 50%. Great control in PvP. And then we have the Frost Mages. Summon Water Elemental, which not only gives you a minion, but also that minion can use another Frost Nova in addition to yours. And timing those Frost Novas can have great control in arena and battlegrounds. Ice Lance was an instant attack that does more damage if your target is frozen. And Icy Vein, which is actually used in almost all specs because it hastens your spellcasting, increases spellcasting by 20%, and gives you a 100% chance to avoid interruption. So Icy Veins is going to be used by almost all mages in every scenario, PvE and PvP. So general overview is for PvE, mages are going to be doing well. They're not going to be as high as Warlocks, most of the time. Now, you are going to have mages that are doing very, very well, and depending on their skill, they can out DPS Warlocks. They scale very well with gear as the expansion moves on and as new raid content comes out, and they are consistent, competitive DPS. This is primarily fire mages, but arcane also works very well, especially with the tier 5 set bonus, which increases your arcane blast damage by 20%. So watch out for those arcane mages as well.
We all know that mages were amazing PvP classes in Classic WoW. Now in TBC, even more so. They still have a lot of their original amazing CC spells, such as Polymorph, Frost Nova, and their slows with Frostbolt, but now they even have more spells and abilities that add to that CC and control and burst. First of which, of course, we get Summon Water Elemental, which gives another Frost Nova ability to the mage and is able to do that at a ranged distance, which gives a lot more play into CC and rooting your target where it's needed. Ice Lance works very well when your target is frozen and can put out very high amounts of burst damage. So mages also get an ability called Spell Steal, which steals a beneficial magic effect from the target. What it does now, if a druid has hots on the target, the mage can spell steal those hots and take them for themselves. It's amazing in PvP, very beneficial. Now, one of the things that works really well with mages here is working with another class that has a high amount of CC and burst potential. So in 2v2, mages go perfectly with rogues, and in 3v3, a comp that is one of the best comps in the game is Priest, Mage, Rogue. Those three classes together synergize so well with the mage's high burst potential and crowd control, and the rogue's high burst potential and crowd control. It is one of the best comps in TBC, and I think we're going to be seeing, of course, a lot of mages in the arena. One downside to mages may be that they do have a high skill cap in arena, but they have high reward with that. So practice makes perfect, and I think we will hopefully see a lot of really skilled mages in the arena.
As far as perks are concerned for mages, not much changes from Vanilla Classic. You still have portals, teleports, food and water, and you have high farming potentials in mage, but you also now have invisibility. So that's something that you'll have to realize, is that you have that in your toolkit to move around maps very easily, maybe even bypass certain encounters in PvE situations as well if you're trying to farm. So good thing to have. Moving on to the Paladins, the Warriors of Light. No longer an Alliance-specific class in TBC Classic, Paladins are now available to the Horde via Blood Elves. And let's get into the nitty-gritty of what some of the amazing changes that happened in TBC Classic. And one of the biggest things is that Ret Paladins didn't really have a attack that was off the swing timer. Now with Crusader Strike, there is a button you can mash in between your auto attacks finally that does 110% weapon damage and refreshes all of the judgments on your target as well. So that's really great in a PvE rotation. Avenger Shield is a tanking ability that you throw your shield out and it hits 3 targets and it dazes them and it comes back. So it's actually a way to do initial AoE threat for a pull for Paladins, which is big. They didn't have a ranged pull in per se, so now you have that in Avenger Shield. And finally, Prot Paladins get Righteous Defense, which is a taunt, but it's not just a taunt, it actually taunts 3 targets. So Paladins have an AoE taunt on a 15-second rotation, making Prot Paladins actually viable. But the most important thing for Ret and protection is Spiritual Attunement. This is a passive ability that you learn from your trainer that gives the Paladin mana when you're healed. So one of the limiting factors for Prot and Retribution Paladins was their mana, and now if you're getting healed, you're able to get some mana back. And if you're a Prot Paladin, you'll be healed a lot more. Now, one thing is that overhealing does not convert to mana, but any healing that actually works for you will. So this will make Prot Paladins work in TBC, and they are the best 5-man dungeon heroic tanks because of their AoE capability. If you want to play Prot Paladin, it's never been more viable. It's also a very important DPS cooldown in Avenging Wrath, what people call Wings. This increases all damage by 30% for 20 seconds. This is going to be a primary DPS and tanking cooldown. As far as the Holy side is concerned, Sanctified Light increases the critical strike chance of your Holy Light spell by 4%, and Divine Illumination reduces the mana cost of all spells by 50% for 15 seconds. This is a cooldown you can use every 3 minutes to reduce all the mana cost of your heals by half for 15 seconds. So this is huge. Holy Paladins didn't change that much. They're still an excellent single target tank healer, so and they are that in TBC Classic as well. Finally, so a flavorful ability is Crusader Aura, which increases your mounted speed for you and all party members by 20%. So it's really great, especially when you're solo. Now, we were remiss if we didn't talk about the different seals you get in TBC Classic depending on which faction you play. So Horde Paladins will get Seal of Blood, while Alliance Paladins will get Seal of Vengeance. These are very different seals in the way they work. Seal of Blood is a guaranteed effect that all melee attacks deal additional holy damage equal to 35% of their normal weapon damage, which means it scales with weapon damage. Seal of Vengeance is a chance, or actually 7 procs per minute, to grant each melee attack a chance to cause 150 holy damage over 15 seconds, and this stat can affect up to 5 times. Now you may think to yourself these are different things that Ret Paladins are going to use, but that's actually not the case. Alliance Ret Paladins in TBC Classic will be using Seal of Command. Seal of Command is the actual DPS seal used for Ret Paladins. So the correct comparison is to compare Seal of Blood to Seal of Command. Seal of Vengeance, unfortunately, does not compete at all with either Seal of Command or Seal of Blood, and is actually relegated to more of a tanking role. But the bad thing about Seal of Vengeance is that it takes so long for these stacks to build up that you'll rarely see Paladins use this in 5-man tanking scenarios. You'll see it in raids, where it actually will start to actually build up some effect and help the threat. So unfortunately, Alliance Paladins don't really have a viable option to compare with Seal of Blood for Retribution DPS. And if you math out the actual differences, Seal of Blood results in 7 to 10% more damage than Seal of Command, and scales with haste, while Seal of Command does not. Furthermore, because Seal of Blood also damages the Paladin, they're going to be receiving more heals, and then get more mana via Spiritual Attunement, which actually causes a positive feedback loop for DPS. So what's going to happen is, Blood Elf Paladins are going to go in, use their Seal of Blood, get damaged, get healed, have more mana to use other abilities like Crusader Strike and other things like that. And allow for Seal Twisting, which actually they can twist Seal of Command and Seal of Blood to actually optimize both seals. Alliance Paladins don't have this option. So if you've heard on the internet that Blood Elf Paladins are going to have an advantage, it is true, and it's because of Seal of Blood. Seal of Blood is a DPS seal, while Seal of Vengeance is really relegated to just tanking, which means Retribution Alliance Paladins are going to have to use Seal of Command to even get close to the DPS output of Seal of Blood. For a PvE overview, as in Vanilla Classic, Holy Paladins are solid and efficient single-target healers, and will be brought into raids for that reason. Prot Paladins are now excellent off-tanks and 5-man tanks, and will be brought into raids as well, to help with off-tanking trash and even some bosses. Retribution Paladins, as far as melee DPS is concerned, can be competitive in a melee DPS role, and will also be brought to raids for that. So all 3 Paladin specs you'll find in most raids. And finally, of course, regardless of the spec they choose, Paladins are important support buffers, putting their blessings on all of your raiders.
Now for PvP, Paladins are pretty interesting to say the least. They definitely are not going to be one of the most common classes that you see in the arena, but they do have their niche to fill. And when it comes to 2v2, there are some really cool things that Ret Paladins and even Holy Paladins can do. Ret Paladins do have a chance for pretty explosive damage with wings that they get, of course, Avenging Wrath. And if you tie that together with something like a Resto Shaman, dropping Bloodlust and Windfury Totems, they can actually do some pretty good burst damage. So 2v2, I would say Ret Paladins do possibly have a place. Like I said, you won't probably see too many of them, but they may surprise you here and then. Also, Shockadins, believe it or not, can do an amazing amount of damage inside the arena. It is a bit of a meme spec, and you won't see it a lot, but you probably will occasionally run across a few of them. Also, Holy Paladins are actually pretty good inside of the 5v5 arena. We haven't talked much about 5v5 because 2v2 and 3v3 are much more common, but in the occasional 5v5, you will see a Holy Paladin in there. Other than that, Holy Paladins are not that great compared to other healers in the 2v2 or 3v3. But like I said, Paladins definitely have a niche where they can fill.
Some additional perks to realize if you're playing a Paladin. Because of Crusader, you have quick travel, and because of the amount of defensive cooldowns you have, you can escape and control many situations, both PvE and PvP. And you're going to have easy gearing in PvE, because there's likely only going to be one of each spec of Paladin in a raid.
Okay, now let's talk about Priests. We all know that Priests were one of the best healers in Classic WoW, but they lacked a little bit in raid healing. In Classic WoW, Priests were more delegated to tank healing, single target healing, with a few capabilities of raid healing with Prayer of Healing. In TBC, Priests get some more abilities that really make raid healing and single target healing much better. The first ability I want to talk about is in the Holy Tree, Circle of Healing. Circle of Healing heals a friendly target and that target's party within 15 yards. Now, the great thing about Circle of Healing is it is also able to use outside of the party. Same way that Chain Heal was used in Vanilla WoW, where it can heal outside of the party, Circle of Healing can do that as well. Priests are no longer limited to just healing the party that they're in, which is a huge asset when it comes to raid healing. Prayer of Mending is another heal that is going to be very useful for raid healing, for PvP, and pretty much any environment they're in. Prayer of Mending is a spell that places on the target that heals them for a certain amount when they take damage. Now, when they take that damage, the Prayer of Mending jumps to another raid member within 20 yards. That Prayer of Mending jumps 5 times and lasts for 30 seconds after each jump. This spell right here is one of my favorite in TBC, and it is absolutely amazing. Priests also get something really cool called Binding Heal. Binding Heal heals the target and the caster, so it's very useful inside of PvP and has some applications in PvE. Priests also get Shadow Fiend. Now, Shadow Fiend is for all specs of Priest, and it creates a Shadowy Fiend that attacks a target. The caster receives mana back when that Shadow Fiend deals damage. Now, so those are some of the changes for Holy Priests. Let's talk about Shadow Priests for a second. Shadow Priests were very lackluster in Vanilla WoW. They were mostly brought to increase the Warlocks DPS, but now Shadow Priests will be doing much more damage and will also add more benefit to the party that they're in with Vampiric Touch. So Vampiric Touch is a dot that lasts for over 15 seconds, and what it does is it does damage, but also gives mana equal to 5% of any shadow damage that you deal. Now, it's just not from that spell, but all shadow damage that you deal. So basically, Shadow Priests turn into almost like a mana battery in TBC, but they also can do a good amount of damage. They also get, and this is not just limited to Shadow Priests, but to all priests, Shadow Word Death. As it reads, is a Word of Dark binding that inflicts 572 to 664, and that's rank 2 version of it, shadow damage to the target. If the target is not killed by Shadow Word Death, the caster takes damage equal to the damage inflicted upon the target. Now, Shadow Word Death will be put into your rotation as a Shadow Priest, but it also has some really cool applications in PvP, like being able to get yourself out of a sheep. Priests also get Mass Dispel, which is a huge application inside of PvP and PvE as well. It dispels in a 15-yard radius, removing 1 harmful spell from each friendly target and 1 beneficial spell from the enemy target. A maximum of 10 friendly targets and 10 enemy targets. This dispel is potent enough to remove magical effects that are normally undispellable, such as Paladin's Bubble and a Mage's Ice Block. So finally, we can stop those Paladins from bubble hearthing out of battlefield or anywhere else. Also, every priest in TBC gets Fear Ward. This is a big change to the racial spells that priests get. Now, all priests will be given Fear Ward, which was one of the most beneficial spells, or one of the most beneficial racial spells in Classic WoW. Another couple cool abilities that you will see priests get. One is a talent in Discipline Tree, Reflective Shield. Also, priests in the Discipline Tree will also get Pain Suppression in the Discipline Tree, which is an amazing PvP cooldown. Now, going over all the priests and all their racials, we'll start over with what racials that the priests get in TBC, because they do have some changes, as we stated, with Fear Ward being gone. So, Trolls still have Hex of Weakness. Now, Undead and Blood Elves have Touch of Weakness. Only Undead have Devouring Plague, Trolls have Shadow Guard, and Blood Elves have something called Consume Magic, which dispels 1 beneficial magic effect from the caster and gives them 120 to 150 mana. On the Alliance side, the Dwarves and the Humans both have Desperate Prayer. The Night Elves still have Star Shards. Draenei have something called Symbol of Hope, which greatly increases the morale of a party member, giving them 33 mana every second, the effect lasting 15 seconds in its basic form. Dwarfs and Draenei also have something called Chastise, which chastises the target, causing some holy damage and immobilizing them for up to 2 seconds. Only works against humanoids. Now, this spell can be very well used inside the arena, basically rooting the target in place. Humans also have the Feedback effect, and Night Elves have Elune's Grace. Now, talking in the overview for PvE, Holy Priests are excellent single target and multi-target healers. Raid healing has vastly improved from vanilla, with Prayer of Healing being outside of the party and Circle of Healing being a new spell that also can heal the party and other members outside the party as well. Prayer of Mending absolutely is another beneficial heal to the raid healing and single target healing, and with the change of multiple HOTS being able to put on targets, that is a big benefit to Renew as well. As we stated before, Shadow Priests are excellent in PvE with having those utility additions such as Vampiric Touch, giving mana back to the raid and dealing much more damage than they did in Classic WoW. Now, we're not saying that Shadow Priests are going to be out DPSing Warlocks or Mages, but they will be a much closer than they were in Classic WoW, with some Shadow Priests being able to push very hard, very high into the meters. For PvP, Disciplined Priests are powerhouses in competitive arena, especially with Rogues in 2v2 and Rogues and Mages in 3v3. The really cool thing about Priests in 2v2 and 3v3 is they are much more of an aggressive healer, doing damage when they can, being able to dispel, mana burn, and heal. Very capable healing as well. You have some cool abilities such as Reflective Shielding, which does damage to the attacker when the player has a shield on them, and things such as Binding Heal, Prayer of Mending, Mass Dispel, Shadow Fiend, Shadow Word Death, all really good assets in the arena. You're going to see a lot of Disciplined Priests in the arena at very high ratings. Shadow Priests also hold its own within the arena in some comps and in Battlegrounds as well. Shadow Priests match up very well with Warlocks or Rogues. Shadow Priests are also very good in 3v3. They're probably not as high rated as you would rate a Disciplined Priest, but Shadow Priests will still be seen within the arena with all their great abilities that they have as well. Some additional perks that are very sought after for PvP and PvE roles, and they're very easy gearing in PvE for Holy and Shadow. Next, we're going to be talking about Rogues. Rogues are very similar in TBC that they were in Classic WoW. However, they do have some changes, especially in PvP. We can talk about some of the talents and abilities that they have changed here. Shiv is very good because you can instantly add your poison to the target in the arena or in the battleground, giving them that slow or effect that you want to give them automatically. Next, Cheat Death is one of the most beneficial spells in the Subtlety tree. This ability gives you a 100% chance that an attack which would otherwise kill you will instead reduce you to 10% of your maximum health. In addition, all damage taken will be reduced up to 90% for 3 seconds. This spell is a get out of jail free card for the Rogue and is a very, very cool little trick. Next, we have Cloak of Shadows. This spell I know a lot of Rogues have been waiting for all of Classic, and we will finally get it in TBC. It instantly removes all existing harmful spell effects and increases your chance to resist all spells by 90% for 5 seconds. This Cloak of Shadows makes it possible where Rogues can now vanish without worrying about having a dot still on them, or when they're ready to go ahead and make a kill, they can go ahead and pop their cloak, don't have to worry about getting feared or anything like that. It is a very good thing to have inside the arena or in any PvP engagement. Also, Subtlety Rogues get something called Shadow Step. Shadow Step steps through the shadows and reappears behind the enemy, increasing their movement speed by 70%. This is an amazing spell to have in PvP. This ability allows the Rogue to teleport directly behind the target with great applications in PvP. Combat Rogues get the addition of Combat Potency, which gives your successful offhand melee attacks a 20% chance to generate 15 energy, and Surprise Attacks, which your finishing moves can no longer be dodged, and the damage dealt by your Sinister Strike, Backstab, Shiv, and Gouge are increased by 10%. All Rogues also get an ability called Deadly Throw. It's a finishing move that reduces the movement of the target by 50% for 6 seconds, which is a great gap closer for targets that are far away. Assassination Rogues get a new ability called Mutilate. Instantly attacks with both weapons for an additional 44 with each weapon. Damage increased by 50% against poison targets. Mutilate does a very high amount of damage, but you will not see too many Assassination Rogues in TBC. Most PvE Rogues will go combat.
Let's do a general overview for Rogues. In PvE, Combat Rogues are going to be the most common Rogue spec you'll see in PvE DPS situations, and their damage gets better as more gear is acquired, but they are a melee DPS, and you may only see one Rogue in most guilds. Assassination Rogues are a viable alternative, but again, Combat Rogues are the ones you'll see most commonly.
In PvP, Subtlety Rogues are one of the best classes in the arena. They have amazing CC potential and amazing burst potential. Subtlety Rogues paired up with Disciplined Priests or Mages are some of the highest 2v2 rated arena teams, and in 3v3, Mages and Priests make great partners to Rogues as well. Rogues, like we said, have amazing burst potential, amazing CC. They have so much new utility such as Shadow Step, Cloak of Shadows that really add to the play of a Rogue in the arena. One thing is that at a very high skill cap, Rogues are one of the best classes right alongside Mages, but it does take a little bit of skill and practice to get that down.
Also, Assassination Rogues or Mutilate Rogues are also viable in Arena, especially in comps with Priests and Warlocks. You might also see Mutilate Rogues in 5s as well. Additional perks: Stealth to bypass certain scenarios and farm items. Of course, that's something they had in Classic Vanilla as well. And they are a great PvP class and very easy gearing if you are that lucky combat rogue that's in your guild. Let's move on to my favorite class, the Shaman. Now, some changes from Vanilla is that Shaman are now available to the Alliance, just like Paladins are available to the Horde via Draenei. So the Draenei are able to be Shaman in TBC Classic. The most important addition to the Shaman arsenal, in my opinion, is Bloodlust or Heroism, depending on your faction. Bloodlust for the Horde and Heroism for the Alliance. This ability increases ranged, melee, and spellcasting speed by 30% for 40 seconds. This is the most powerful PvE cooldown by far, and every raid will have multiple Shaman because of this reason. In TBC, Bloodlust is party-wide, not raid-wide, so you actually give it to your party when you want. So you can synergize this, you can have all 5 parties get it, or you can rotate Shaman to give this Bloodlust to the highest DPS part of your group. And commonly what you'll see is, we had Totem Twisting in Vanilla WoW, and you'll still have Totem Twisting in TBC, but now we have what we're called Shaman Twisting, where you're actually moving the Shaman from group to group, providing that DPS increase. So again, this is a huge addition to the Shaman's arsenal and makes them probably the most popular class in the game. They also have 2 elemental totems in the form of Earth Elemental Totem and Fire Elemental Totem, and these are shared cooldowns. And there's a 20-minute cooldown, and you can either bring out your Earth Elemental, which can tank for you, yes, your personal tank now with Shamans every 20 minutes, or have your Fire Elemental, which increases your DPS. So you're going to bring out your Fire Elemental maybe in certain situations to do some damage, and your Earth Elemental when you're soloing for some tanking. Totemic Call. Finally, you don't have to worry about leaving totems behind. With one button, you can remove all the totems on the map and bring them back to you and get refunded 25% of your mana. So if you have 4 totems down and you use Totemic Call, one of those totem costs is now free. So very, very good to have. Will limit the chance of wiping because of totems pulling things, and it's just a great housekeeping ability that Shamans get. Another very important addition is Water Shield. This is actually the most popular shield in all PvE situations for any spec. Literally, having it on gives you mana, and there's no mana cost to use it. So as long as the shield is active, you will gain mana back, and if you get hit during that time, you get even more mana. So there's 3 charges, just like Lightning Shield. If you get hit, you get X amount of mana, depending on the rank of Water Shield, and just having it on you is an MP5 generator. So this is going to help alleviate mana issues for all Shaman, even Enhancement. Wrath of Air Totem is a totem that all Shaman get, which actually increases the spell damage and healing by 101 of all party members around you. So Resto Shaman and Elemental Shaman will be using this to buff other casters and healers in their group. Very, very important addition to the Shaman arsenal. Now, Shaman, like mages, there are a lot of changes. So we're going to have to go over the enhancement changes, the elemental changes, and the restoration changes. So first, enhancement. Enhancement went from a spec that was highly limited in their damage output, primarily due to their mana. But that's not just the case. Enhancement Shamans are given some excellent buffs that are going to make them needed in a raid encounter for the melee group, and also some abilities that it's going to increase their DPS. The first is Unleash Rage. This causes all critical strikes with melee attacks to increase all of your party's melee attack power by 6% if within 20 yards of the Shaman. So this is great because what it does is it buffs the other melee in your group. So Enhancement Shaman are going to put in the group with the Warriors, Rogues, and Paladins, the Ret Paladins, to increase their damage. Shamanistic Focus. After landing a melee critical strike, you enter a focus state and reduces the mana cost of your next shock by 60%. So this is a mana saving ability for Enhancement Shaman. So the more crit they have, the more mana efficient their shocks are. And shocks are going to be an important part of your rotation in TBC Classic because Earth Shock doesn't have any additional threat anymore. And again, the debuff limits are much higher, so you can use Flame Shock if you need to for certain situations. Probably the biggest change is that Enhancement Shamans get the ability to dual wield. Dual wielding is actually the highest DPS output compared to two-handers in TBC Classic, at least for PvE is concerned. So you're going to be using 2 one-handers, both of them with Wind Fury weapon. There is some theory craft that says Wind Fury and Flame Tongue. So you can actually put different weapon imbues on each of your weapons, but most scenarios going to be double Wind Fury. And then finally, Shamanistic Rage, which reduces all damage taken by 30% and gives your successful melee attacks a chance to regenerate mana. This is kind of like an evocate for Shaman in PvE situations. If you get low on mana, you pop this and you start just gaining mana back as you hit the target. And in PvP situations, this is actually a double-edged sword because you have to pick, do you want the damage reduction or do you want the mana? So it's kind of one of those things where you have to hope that maybe they both kind of synergize so you can stop taking damage and getting mana back at the same time. Elemental Shaman recently have been doing very well in Classic WoW, but classically have been thought of as a meme spec because of their mana situations. So to combat that, Elemental Shamans get Unrelenting Storm, which generates mana equal to 10% of your intellect every 5 seconds, even when casting, and that's just a passive talent they get. Also, this changes to how Elemental Focus or Clear Casting works in Shaman and TBC. Now when you crit, the next 2 spells actually get a reduced mana cost instead of just 1 free cast. So you're actually going to build crit synergy to save mana as an Elemental Shaman. Lightning Overload gives your Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning a 20% chance to have a second similar spell on the same target at no additional cost. So just spamming Lightning Bolt, every 1 out of 5 Lightning Bolts or Chain Lightning is going to cast another one for free. So you're going to have all these like multiple Lightning Bolts shooting out, and this is a DPS increase as well. Elemental Precision increases the hit with Fire, Frost, and Nature Slip by 6%. So pair that with 3% you get from Nature's Guidance and Restoration, and Totem of Wrath, which gives another 3% hit. You're going to have a lot of hit coming out of the gate as an Elemental Shaman, and crit thanks to the crit synergies that's in Elemental and Restoration. So an Elemental Shaman are going to be coming before even stepping into a raid with high amounts of hit and high amounts of crit to sustain their mana and to allow them to do DPS. And that allows Elemental Shaman to be very high DPS casters early on in the game. And that leads to Totem of Wrath. This is a party-wide buff that's going to give 3% crit and 3% hit to all casters in your group, which is one of the big reasons why Elemental Shamans are brought into raids, to buff the other casters, especially Warlocks with 3% hit and 3% crit. Finally, we have Restoration, which is the least changed of all the Shaman specs. Restoration Shaman get improved Chain Heal, which increases the amount healed by your Chain Heal by 20%. Chain Heal is already an amazing spell. This boosts it by another 20%, and if this works synergistically with Tier 2 3-piece, yes, Tier 2 3-piece may still be beneficial in TBC Classic, so I would hold on to your Tier 2 if you're playing a Shaman right now. Nature's Blessing, which is a flat increase of your healing, and then finally Earth Shield, which is a reactive heal. This puts 6 charges of Earth Shield on the target. When they are hit, it releases healing. This is a preemptive healing spell you can put on targets so that when they get hit, they get healed immediately. This is a very unique spell in TBC Classic, and one of the reasons why Resto Shamans are one of the most sought after healers in the game. As far as a general overview, PvE, Shaman are the most sought after class in competitive PvE due to their totems and bloodlust, and you're going to see most likely almost in most guilds 5 Shaman brought into the raid, which makes them most likely the most popular class in TBC Classic. Enhancement is an excellent melee buffer in competitive DPS, while Elemental is a caster buffer while also providing competitive DPS, and Restoration is excellent single and multi-target healer that you will see heavily sought after in the game. In PvP, Enhancement, Elemental, Restoration can all perform well in competitive PvP, but with the right comps, right? We talked about Ret Paladin and Resto Shaman. That is a 2's comp that you may see. Not very popular, but you may definitely see it. Also, Enhancement and Restore Druid is another comp that you'll see from time to time. And then Elemental Shaman does really well in 5-man groups, as can Enhancement. So in 5s, you'll see Elemental to provide Bloodlust and Burst DPS, and Enhancement for the same reason. Additional perks, you have your own personal tank, and in the Earth Elemental totem, you have your personal use Bloodlust when you're soloing, which is great. Pair that with the Earth Elemental, you can take down elites pretty easily. You have 15-minute Hearthstone, and you're an extremely popular class in all PvE settings. Alright, now it's time to move on to the Warlocks, which has the capacity of being the top range DPS, regardless of physical or magical in the game. This is because of a few reasons. In early TBC, you'll see Affliction Warlocks doing a lot of damage. This is primarily because you don't have enough hit to really make Destruction work. Because of buffs like Shadow Embrace and Malediction, increasing the damage over time portions of the damage, and Unstable Affliction, which is a new dot, Affliction Warlocks are able to put out an insane amount of damage early on in the game. Also, Curse of Elements has been changed. It actually increases Arcane, Fire, Frost, and Shadow damage taken by 10%, so it works synergistically with other classes, especially Fire Mages, Shadow Priests, and Arcane Mages. As far as Destruction is concerned, Backlash increases the critical strike chance with spells by additional 3%. Shadow and Flame, your Shadow Bolt and Incinerate spells gain an additional 25% of your bonus spell damage effects. This is why Shadow Bolt spam is the way to go as a Destruction Warlock as soon as you attain enough hit, which is approximately around 10% without Totem of Wrath. As far as Demonology is concerned, Demonology is primarily the PvP tree, but you also see points in Affliction as well. Demonic Resilience and Summon Felguard are new additions to the Demonic tree, as well as Mana Feed. When you gain mana from Drain Mana or Lifetop spells, your pet also gains 33% of the mana you gain, which works synergistically depending on what pet you're using, depending on what pet you use. Finally, Demonic Knowledge increases your spell power by amount equal to 12% of your demon stamina plus intellect. So again, Demonology, the way it works in TBC is this: you have this interesting synergy between your pet and yourself, increasing your survivability in PvP situations. For a general PvE overview of Warlocks, again, they have the capability of being the top DPS class in all raid tiers. Affliction is primarily used in early game and then transitions to Destruction as long as you have enough hit, and if you play Warlock, you will definitely have places in Raid that are very popular PvE pickups.
So as Melderon said, Warlocks are some of the highest DPS in PvE. They are also one of the strongest classes in PvP. And the reason being is the SLSL spec. SLSL stands for Soul Link Siphoned Life. Basically, you go down into the Soul Link talent in the Demonology tree and the Siphoned Life talent into the Affliction tree. With this spec, not only is the Warlock very capable of putting dots on multiple targets, but they're also very tanky and very strong. This spec right here makes Warlocks very sought after in the arena. They are right up there with Druids as one of the best specs to bring into the arena. They can hold off on their own. They pretty much just dot and let the target rot while they stay alive. They have extremely good CC in the form of Fear, but their biggest thing that they bring to the arena is the fact that they can put out a very good amount of damage while also staying alive. One of the biggest things in PvP is staying alive, and Warlocks do that exceptionally well. I think we're going to see Warlocks at the highest echelon of Arena. We're going to see them in 2v2s with Druids, and we're going to see them in 3v3 with Druids and Warriors. Definitely going to see a lot of Warlocks very high up on the ladder in Arena in TBC.
Some additional perks of Warlock is that summoning now also works. If the game is in 2.4.3, will work anywhere in the world. So what I mean by that is if you're in a raid and you want to summon someone who's stuck in Gadgetzin or Azeroth, you can summon them right into the raid, and that changed in 2.4.3, which is really nice. And then another perk is that there's just heavily sought after class for both PvE and PvP. Alright, time to talk about the Warriors, guys. I'll start this by saying that there are a ton of Warriors in Vanilla Classic, and Warriors are good in TBC Classic for sure. They're great, they can be great in Arena, and they are the de facto tanks in TBC as they were in Vanilla. But there's not as much room for Warriors as there was in Vanilla Classic. Not much really changes for Warriors. They get Victory Rush, so after you kill a target, you're able to use this ability to do some damage. Blood Frenzy, your Ren and Deep Wounds abilities also increase your physical damage to that target by 4%, which is a nice synergy for arms. You get Endless Rage in the arms tree, which you generate 25% more rage from the damage dealt, which is actually not used in PvE in the PvE build for DPS, interestingly enough. Rampage is the 41-point Fury talent, which the warrior goes into Rampage, increasing attack power by 50 and causing most melee attacks to increase attack power by additional 50. And this is the Fury 41 point, like I said before. Fury is actually not very common early on in TBC, will become a viable DPS spec as warriors get more geared later in the game, so keep that in mind. All warriors get Commanding Shout, which is a new shout that increases the health of them and their party members. The 41-point talent for protection is now Devastate, which changes Sunder Armor to a non-damaging spell to a spell that does damage. So not only does it apply the Sunder Armor effect, but it also does damage to the target as well, which increases its potential threat pool and how much threat it can produce. Improved Discipline increases the cooldown of Retaliation, Recklessness, and Shield Wall abilities by 10%. This is a really interesting talent that decreases that 30-minute CD to something a little bit more manageable. Improved Slam, this is actually an old ability, not a new ability, but the tooltip has been changed to decrease the casting time of your Slam ability by 1 second with 2 ranks, whereas in Vanilla it was 0.1 seconds with 5 ranks. So you have to put 5 points in just to get a half-second delay in your Slam cooldown. But now, because of this change, the DPS rotation for arms is actually built around Slam. And as far as tanking is concerned, Protection Warriors get even more beefy with improved defensive stance and vitality, decreasing the damage they take and increasing their strength and stamina with each rank of these abilities in the Protections tree. Also, Warriors get Spell Reflect, which, as long as you have a shield on, you can actually raise your shield and deflect a next spell cast on you, and that effect lasts 5 seconds. So overall, Protection Warriors get tankier, while Arms and Fury Warriors get shifted around a bit, but Arms is still a very, very good both PvE and PvP build. And one of the weird changes with Warriors is that Sweeping Strikes and Death Wish actually switch positions in the talent system. So if you remember back in Vanilla, Sweeping Strikes is an arm talent, while Death Wish was a Fury talent, and they've been switched. You still have to get both, though, to make the PvE build work. And what you're seeing on your screen is the PvE build. So you actually just go to Mortal Strike and Arms. You don't even go down to your 41-point talent as a DPS, just so you can pick up Sweeping Strikes, because Sweeping Strikes is, of course, amazing for trash and some boss encounters. General overview for Warriors. At PvE, again, they are the de facto main tank in TBC. They're going to be, most skills are going to be running a warrior in that position because of their abilities to mitigate damage and deal with situations and boss encounters. Arms is a competitive melee DPS spec, and again, Fury can take over in DPS in later endgame around tier 6 because of the gear itemization and how Fury works. Again, you won't see many warriors in PvE situations in Classic TBC, but they will have important positions.
So in PvP, you will see a lot of warriors, and let me tell you why. You all know in PvP, in original classic, warriors are some of the most damage output in PvP, but when you put a healer with them, they become even stronger, and that is the exact same in TBC. Warriors are already capable of doing insane amount of damage. They're able to reduce the amount of healing with Mortal Strike by 50%, but when you tie that up with one of the best healers, or probably the best healer in the arena, the Druid, comes one of the most strongest 2v2 comps in the game. Back when I played in TBC, the 2v2 comp I went up most against was Warrior Druid, just because of its insane strength, the CC capabilities with Fear, the slow with Hamstring, the slow with Cyclone with Druids. The Warriors are just an insane amount of DPS. They're very tanky, they're easy to keep up, and they can produce the damage that is needed to kill a healer or to kill another target. In 3v3, they're also very, very strong, tied up with a Druid or a Warlock. Guys, don't fret. If you play a Warrior in Classic, you're definitely going to have a spot in PvP. They are one of the most commonly played classes in PvP. They do tons of damage and are very, very good.
Some additional perks as a warrior is that it's easy gearing as a tank or a DPS. Likely most guilds, again, this is most guilds, are going to have only 2 warriors in the entire raid. One's a tank, one's a DPS. So there's going to be easy gearing for that class in PvE. And they have low downtime while grinding and leveling, right? So, you know, warriors have rage, they're built on rage, so you usually have low downtime if you're trying to grind or level. So that's a great thing about warriors. So we went over a lot of things today, guys, and I just want to say that we talked about what a standard raid would look like or what the meta may be. Remember to play what you want. The most important thing is to pick the class and the spec that's going to make you happy, right? Casual guilds and casual PvP comps will exist. That is for sure going to happen. What I stress is for people to look for the right guilds and the right server types. Picking the streamer server that's PvP is not a good choice if you want to run a casual guild. On the flip side, if you want to run a competitive guild, don't run an RP server, right? That makes sense. The reason why there's server options is to build communities, and there are certain communities that are driven by the meta, and there's certain communities that aren't. But learning new ways to make things work is extremely important. Not everything is figured out in TBC Classic compared to Vanilla Classic. Moreover, will be surprises. Look at Elemental Shaman in Vanilla Classic. No one thought they'd be a competitive PvE class because of nature resistance, which is non-existent. So there are going to be differences between private servers and the classic setups. So if you're trying to make something work, keep trying to.
Yeah, and the same thing goes with PvP. I mean, of course, there are the best meta comps that are in the game. But like Melderon just said, there's still a lot of stuff in TBC that needs to be explored. And occasionally you do see comps that will surprise the hell out of you, you know, such as the Ret Resto comp or, you know, many others that I'm sure we will see coming in TBC. If you are a Druid, I'm sure you're going to have a good time with any class, but, you know, play the class that you want to play the comp that you want to play. If you want to play with your friend, it might not be the best comp, play with your friend. You know, try to make the best with what you have. The thing is, in TBC, the classes are very, very well balanced in a way that each class has something to bring to the table. But the best part is they are still very different from each other, very unique, very fun to play, and I cannot wait for TBC.
Well, with that, guys, we'd like to wrap things up. But before we do, we want to talk about other TBC Classic resources that are out there. Aside from Defcamp and myself, who make videos about this stuff, Classic WoW.live is a hub for guides related to both Vanilla Classic and TBC Classic content. And new guides will be uploaded there soon in preparation for TBC launching, so definitely check that out. Crix Gaming is a friend of the channel and a Warlock expert who has been constantly making TBC content. He's a newer channel, but he knows what he's talking about. Definitely check out Crix's YouTube channel and his streaming platform. Ale is a friend of the channel and helped create Classic WoW.live. He's also going to be making TBC content, and he knows a lot about all facets of the game. Cargos, of course, if you don't know who Cargos is, go check him out. Cargos is going to be making leveling guides for all the classes for TBC, as well as some other types of guides for TBC Classic. Grace for Days is working on dungeon guides, heroic dungeon guides for TBC Classic. All of the links to these guys' YouTube channels and their Twitch channels will be in the description below. Please go support them if you want to learn more about TBC Classic.
And guys, if you want to come out and hang out with myself and sometimes Melderon, you can come check us out at twitch.tv/Defcamp.
Well, thanks, guys. I hope you're as excited as we are for TBC Classic. Keep on and grinding. We'll see you on the next TBC Classic guide.